I am not a good prayer in the traditional sense, but I do have some great conversations with God every once in a while. Great in the sense that they are very tense and challenging. So this week I was driving my big truck around, and it's an automatic, which is very strange because I heard God telling me, "You have your foot on the clutch." And I knew right away he wasn't talking about my truck because my truck doesn't have a clutch. So I was, what do you mean? What do you mean? Everything seems to be running well. And he says, no, ever since you've come back to the States, which was about 4 years ago, you've had your foot on the clutch. And I had to think about that for a while because we've been going to church, we've been tithing, we've been loving our small group and the people in our church. You know, all the gauges were good. I feel fueled up. Everything seems to be healthy, operational. Everything's good. But my foot is on the clutch. And I'm not going anywhere. And I can't help but feel that is also a message for our church, because our church does some things very well. We really love each other. And I'm so thankful for that. And that's one of the big reasons we made this our home. But I can't help but get a sense that our church has a foot on the clutch. That we're not really moving yet. I'm here this morning to introduce a new series that I have. Babe, can you get the markers out of my pocket? On disciple making. Jesus very clearly asked us to make disciples. How are we doing? Now, I want to give you, we're going to do a couple things this morning. We're going to work on developing an awareness of what disciple making is. And hopefully, it's summertime, hopefully you missed school already, because this is going to feel a little bit like syllabus day, the first day of class. And I'm hoping you're going to be a little bit overwhelmed. Discipling 101. So we're going to talk a little bit about what discipling is, to build an awareness of what discipling is, and then I'm going to lay out a map of the discipling process that we are going to cover in depth for the next 8 to 10 weeks. And we're going to take it piece by piece, and we're going to practice it together every week. Because Jesus asks us to make disciples, and we're here to follow him. That's right. So, let me start with prayer. Oh, good Father, I want to pray for unity and blessing on our city, on our church, and for my family, but I know that blessing often comes with obedience. And so I just pray that this morning and over the next coming weeks, that you would open up your presence, invite us in to see and to feel and to know your heart, so that we can begin to care about the things that you care about. And that you would begin to lead us and give us courage so that we can follow you where you're going. Because I know that unity and blessing are going to come from that. I know it. So Lord, I just pray that you would begin a new journey in us this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. I want to start with a couple of objections that you might be having when faced with the task of making disciples. because it is overwhelming. A couple things that are going to be overwhelming is, one, you're going to say, well, making disciples isn't really politically correct anymore. Our culture isn't exactly open to spirituality, especially Christian spirituality. And I want to assure you that no culture ever has been. It has never, ever been easy to make disciples.
That's true.
For Adam and Eve, God blessed them and gave them a purpose. And it wasn't, there were no people yet on the earth, and their purpose still wasn't easy, right? What was the blessing command? They had one rule, not to eat of the tree, and they had one command, blessing. What was it? Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. It's not going to be easy. You're going to have to go out, you're going to have to be fruitful, multiply, and subdue it. No people yet on the earth, and your task is still going to be really, really hard. I also want to make a point here that this was a mandate from the very beginning, and that the blessing was tied to the command. It's so easy for us, especially in our culture and with our upbringings, to want the rewards without the obedience. One. And it's so easy for us to separate the two. But I want you to know that we do not have a $5 father. Okay? We do not have a father who is so busy that he said, here's $5, go get a cheeseburger. We don't have that kind of father. Here's your reward. And it has nothing to do with obedience or presence. We have a father who says to us, hey, come here. I want to show you something. Here, try this. Try it like that. Let's build something beautiful together. That's the kind of father we have. And if you are not experiencing much in the way of blessing, there might be a whole lot of reasons for that. And I don't know where you are, but I know that you are going to experience a whole lot more blessing if you spend some time in the presence of the Father and if you join in his purpose.
That's right.
Because his blessing is tied to his presence and his purpose.
That's right. Amen.
If you really want to experience the blessing of God, then you need to join him. Do not fall into the trap, as most religious people do, of focusing on the reward without focusing on the purpose. And he told them to he told them to subdue the earth. And I know, I trust in Jesus, the Messiah, because Jesus goes back and he fulfills every single command, every single promise that was ever given by God. Jesus fulfills it. So Jesus takes the mandate of Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply, and he tells his disciples, go into all the earth and make disciples. And he gives them authority to do it, right? As God gave Adam and Eve authority. Go out, make disciples. All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Go. So our culture isn't ready for it is not a good excuse. The second excuse that we often hear from God's people throughout Scripture is that I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not mature enough. I'm not a good speaker. I'm not an evangelist. Why would you require me to make disciples? I don't stand on street corners and preach. But I want you to think about every important thing that has happened to you in your life. Have you ever been ready for any of them? Were you ready to get married? Were you ready to have kids? Were you ready for going into several $100,000s of home debt? Were you ready for any of the best things that have ever happened to you in your whole life? You weren't. And the good news is that no one requires you to be ready. Jesus requires that you be willing.
Amen.
Because God, the Father, is ready.
That's good.
Everything that has happened to you so far in your spiritual life, how much of that has had to do with you? So when you receive the task of making disciples, how much of that is going to have to do with you? You don't have to be ready. God is ready. It's His purpose. It's His blessing, and He will do it. So we are going to be on a journey to making family. And I'm going to ask you to join me, and we're going to make a map. And we're going to make a map to family, because that is God's purpose. Jesus told a story that drives me nuts, because I'd make a really good religious person. I'm an older brother, and I'll work harder than anybody. But Jesus told me a story that tore me apart, because I still don't really care about what the Father cares about. The Father cares about family. His purpose is building a family.
That's right.
This summer, we're starting a series, and it's an outward excursion. So we could call it, if you want, a summertime, all-inclusive family vacation. That's the trip we're going to go on in the next 8 to 10 weeks. Let's talk a little bit about what discipling is, because discipling at its core is relational. Now, in our spirituality, in our growth, we have several relationships. We have inward relationships, we have upward relationships, and we have outward relationships. Discipling, don't reduce it to a task. Discipling is a relationship. And discipling will follow a relational pattern. And so we're going to draw a map that talks about the stages of building a relationship. And I think you'll relate very quickly to some of the relationships you've built. Especially pay good attention if you're a teenager. And also reflect back, because the way that you win a bride or a groom and start a family is really a key story that we're going to use in the next 8 to 10 weeks to describe what it's like to make a disciple and to build a family. So we're going to start with the process, stages, 4 stages: observation. You know, I'm sure that all the teenagers in the room have been checking out everybody who has a really fine soul in here. Observation is the first stage. Then we move into interaction. When the timing is just right, we're going to move into interaction, and we're going to make a move. We're going to have a really good line, right? To introduce ourselves in a super cool kind of way. And then we're going to begin getting to know each other, building affection. And if all of these things go well, at some point along the way, we're going to move into devotion. These are the basic stages of building a relationship and building a family. Now, let me just throw out my definition of discipling. As I mentioned, it's our outward relationship to the world, right? As God's spiritual children. Discipling is calling others to follow Jesus back home and to rediscover fullness in the family of God. right? So it's our outward relationship. In a world full of runaways, we're calling people to come back home and to re-experience, rediscover the goodness of being in God's family.
That's right.
It's relational. The second thing about discipling is it is a great adventure. So we need to confront right away this idea we have of standing on street corners or of door-to-door salesmen. That has nothing to do with discipleship. It has nothing to do with relationship. So get that out of your head. We are not selling anything. We're calling our brothers and sisters to come back home and to be family again. And someone out there this week is ready to come home. We get to go find them.
That's right. Love it.
It's fun. It's an adventure. We are going to, I have the great privilege and enjoyment of sharing a story today about how not to make disciples. We're going to look at a story from the life of Jacob, and we're going to go through this map, and I'm going to show you step by step how not to build a family. And then over the next 8 to 10 weeks, we're going to go back with another story that Jacob knew. He had a map that he didn't use like most men. And we're going to show you step by step how we do make disciples. How not to. Let me tell you a little bit about Jacob first, give you a little background. Jacob means heel grabber. When Jacob was born, he was a twin, and he was the second twin. And he was kind of resentful about it because as he came out of the womb, he was holding his twin's ankle, trying to get ahead. From the very moment he came into this world, he was trying to get ahead of his brother. So they called him the heel grabber, Jacob. And he struggled growing up. He struggled the whole time with his brother because his brother was a man's man. Big and strong. He was a hunter. He'd bring some good meat to the barbecue. And Jacob was more a stay-at-home, read books kind of guy. And finally, after they'd grown up, as their father was getting older and started talking about dying and passing on his blessing, Jacob decided to finally, once and for all, get ahead of his brother. And he tricked his father. He dressed up like his brother. His father was blind. He dressed up like his brother, he smelled like his brother, he made food like his brother, and he went in and pretended to be his brother in order to get the family blessing from their father. And he stole it. He stole the family blessing. And it was a little awkward after that. And his brother started talking about, well, our father's almost gone, and when he is, you will be soon after. So his mother and father said, you need to get out of here. And at the same time, you need to start a family. So we're going to send you back to the land of our relatives to find a wife. So he set out on a journey that we're going to look at here to win a bride and start a family. And hopefully this time, maybe this time, if he did everything well, he could make his dad proud, right? So we're going to look at Genesis 29, and we're going to go through these stages and see how Jacob did it. And I hope that you will think back to maybe when you were courting your spouse, your girlfriend or your boyfriend, or maybe you'll take notes if you're looking for a girlfriend or boyfriend. Keep in mind, this is how not to do it. Genesis 29. And allow me to paraphrase a little bit as we go and to pause so that we can talk about each stage. Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. As he looked, he saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep lying beside it. For out of the well the flocks were watered. Now I want you to try and picture this as we go along. Picture Jacob, long journey, walking, coming up over a hill, seeing some beautiful pastures and a well, some flocks of sheep. Visualize it as we go through the story. The stone on the well's mouth was large, and the shepherds would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place over the mouth of the well. Jacob said to them, "My brothers, hey, where do you come from?" They said, "We're from Haran." He said to them, "Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor?" They said, "We know him." They were good teenagers, kind of the one-sentence answers. He said to them, "Well, is it well with him?" And they said, "It is well. See, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep." And he said, "Behold, it's still high day. It isn't time for the livestock to be gathered together. Water your sheep and go pasture them." But they said, "We cannot until all the flocks are gathered together, and then the stone is rolled from the mouth of the well. Then we water the sheep." While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Now as soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, and we're going to pause right there, because the observation stage is over. So Jacob shows up on the scene, and he starts asking questions. So his method of observation, I'm going to call assess. He's going to assess the situation. And he starts asking lots and lots of questions. Hey, am I in the right place? Right? Is this Haran? Yeah? It is? Okay. I'm looking for a guy named Laban. Is he nearby? Yes, you can almost imagine if he had the tools that we have today, you know he would have been on his smartphone. He would have Google Earthed Laban's house, right? He probably would have Facebook stalked several of Laban's family members. If he could find his social security number, he probably would have even checked their IRS tax returns. You know, what kind of income? It's looking pretty good. Okay, we're ready, right? We're in that information gathering stage. That's what he's doing. He's info gathering. And he's very good. In just a couple of very quick, simple questions, he gets all the information that he needs. Okay, is this Haran? Okay. Is Laban nearby? Okay. Is he doing well? Right? Because if he's in the poorhouse, I might turn around and go home. Okay, he's doing well. And he has a daughter. Great. He figures all of this information out within just a few minutes. He would have made a very good millennial. And then, notice what he does. When Rachel comes, he says, okay, beautiful daughter, check. Lots and lots of sheep, check. He's evaluating the benefits. Does this look to be worth pursuing? Because assessment at its root, just our human nature is what we do, is primarily self-interest. We want to be successful. We want as efficiently as possible, right? Gather all the information we need. Evaluate, is this going to be good or bad, so that we can make a decision whether it's worth pursuing or not. That's Jacob's observation stage. And I'm guessing that as we become focused on making disciples, we'll probably do it too. Because, be honest with yourself at school. Would you rather make the disciple of a jock who's really popular, or the kid who always sits by himself at lunch? Which one would you rather disciple? Would you rather disciple the guy with the El Camino or the Porsche? We do it all the time in our relationships. Is this relationship going to be good for me or bad for me? Is it going to cost me more or is it going to benefit me more? Let's move on to interaction. So Jacob asks all these questions. He sees Rachel, he sees sheep, and immediately Jacob came near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud. Oh, you gotta love this guy. I really, really do, and I hate him. Because his strategy here is to impress. And I have kind of fun with it, and I would encourage this when you hear stories from the Bible. Picture it, live it out. What was it like? Because I can just see him as Rachel comes up doing this whole thing. I sense that you are the daughter of Lion lobbying Laban, and that he's doing very well. But don't be overly impressed with my psychic abilities. Here, let me roll this stone away, and you can be overly impressed with my superior strength. And if that doesn't do it, then let me show you how tender and big-hearted I am by weeping and kissing you. Impress. Jacob, again, in the matter of a few moments, he's leveraging all of his assets, whatever they are, whether it's intelligence, whether it's strength. These boys with their flocks, they're waiting for more guys to show up so they can move the rock. Let me show you what a real man can do. Right? He's using his strength, he's using his intelligence, he's using his emotions. He's using it all to try and impress her from the very beginning, and he's focusing his attention. Forget about those other boys. They're like not even in the room anymore. Let me single-handedly water all of your sheep. Focused attention. You are the only thing that matters. You are the center of my world. You are special. And this, you can see very quickly, is built on self-reliance. He's always been trying to get ahead. He had to be the smartest. His brother was kind of the biggest and the manliest, so he had to use his smarts. He had to figure out how to get ahead on his own. Self-reliance. And it's really easy to do this too in making disciples. Right? Would you rather start introducing yourself from a place of blessing or from a place of weakness? In my life, I've really struggled with this and this, and I can see that must be really hard for you too. Do we start from places of weakness, or do we start from places of our own strength? when we're building relationships. From there, Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kinsman, that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told their father. And as soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Jacob told Laban all these things, and Laban said to him, "Surely you are bone and my flesh." And he stayed with him a month. So now we enter the affection stage, where we build familiarity, right, and security. We know how each other reacts to things. We start having some inside jokes together. Familiarity, and Jacob immediately moves in and becomes part of the family. In this stage, I would call it Jacob's primary strategy is to endear himself. Right? I really, really want them to like me. The first thing that he does to do that is to try and, build off of that commonality. Emphasize commonality. I had no idea how powerful this is. One, when I moved to Mongolia, and you can't just walk up to guys and say, "Hey, did you watch that Seahawks game?" They have no idea who the Seahawks are. They have no idea what Seattle is. They don't know what American football is. How do you build commonality with strangers? And it was even more, surprising to me coming back to the States, because I was such a bad small talker. I still am. But it's so many conversations, it's like, "I'm sorry, dude, I really don't care about your sports or your investments or your pets or the weather. I want to talk about something significant." It was really hard for me to establish commonality. And it's kind of scaring me how much better I am at getting there. How much easier it is to talk about the weather and to try and establish that, hey, we're buds. Oh, you like the Seahawks, I like the Seahawks. And it scares me a little bit because I'm worried about needing to be liked. Another thing that Jacob does is, I would say, over-generosity. He wants to be liked so much that he's willing to do anything. By spending enough time, and as we get into this, what is it? He's asked, what is it he wants? And he said, "Well, I'll work for you 7 years for your daughter Rachel." 7 years. Think about that. If it was today, and if Jacob was making an average annual salary, I'll give you $250,000 for your daughter, for her hand in marriage. Oh my goodness. Usually like in Mongolia, it's, maybe a horse. $1,000. Or, you get a really nice diamond ring for your fiance. 3, 4, 5,000, I don't know. $250,000 for your daughter's hand in marriage. This guy really, really wants to be liked. Let's look at how it turns out. Laban said to Jacob, "Because you're my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be?" Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance, and Jacob loved Rachel. And he said, "I'll serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel." Laban said, "It's better that I give her to you than I give her to some other guy. Stay with me." Isn't that crazy? Notice he didn't say yes. Better I give her to you. Stay with me. Let's put in those 7 years. We'll see. Show me that $250,000. Jacob kind of met his match here with the trickster. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. Now that is genuinely sweet. Good job, Jacob. But you notice we moved quickly from affection into devotion. So where you get down to talking about commitments. Okay, what are you going to put into this? What am I going to put into this? And Jacob moves immediately to exchange. I will work 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. I'll give you this, you give me that. Let's make a contract. This is how it will be good for you. This is how it will be good for me. And one thing that you often see in an unhealthy relationship is when you start quantifying. Right? Well, I washed the dishes 3 times last week, so what are you going to do? You know, when you start quantifying, you know you're in a dangerous position.
Right.
The other dangerous thing about Jacob's strategy is it was based on hard work, labor. Now, granted, it passed quickly and it was even joyful because of the reward he knew he was going to get at the end. But it was lots and lots and lots of really, really hard work. As the story goes on, not only did he serve 7 years, but he was tricked into marrying the other daughter and required to put in another 7 years for the wife that he did want. The irony is that if he would have used his map, the map that we are going to use in the next 8 to 10 weeks, that map comes from a very similar story that was his mother's story and how she became a bride. Jacob's story here in Genesis 29, just a few chapters earlier, in Genesis 24, Jacob had a very good map on how to win a bride and start a family, and he didn't use it. Because Jacob, it took him, all in all, it took him nearly 20 years of hard labor, all kinds of family dysfunction. They barely escaped with their lives, and he ended up not even choosing the right bride. And all of that took him 20 years, where it took his mother 20 hours. In less than a day, she became a bride and started a family. Jacob's strategy does not work. What took his mother 20 hours took him 20 years and all kinds of pain. And as we begin to look at making disciples, I want to save you lots and lots of pain. There's going to be pain. People are difficult. People are messy. It's going to be hard, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be an adventure. If you're overwhelmed a little bit by this map, how are you going to work on all these stages and make a disciple and bring them and start a new family of God? It is overwhelming. But we're going to take each of these stages in the next few weeks, and we're going to go over it piece by piece by piece. And we're going to look at the map that God gave us and how to do it. And it's going to be a ton of fun. But it's time. It's time that we take our foot off the clutch as a church. The only way that our city is going to be transformed is if we start making disciples. It's the only way. I don't remember which philosopher said, but before you can transform a new society, before you can build a new society, you have to build a new person. If we want to transform Redmond, we have to transform people. And the only power I have ever experienced that transforms someone is the power of Jesus.
Yes.
Because Jesus works from the inside out and he really changes people. We've got to make disciples. The only way that our church is going to grow is if we make disciples. It's the only way. Many of us are spiritually growth capped. You know, our worship is great. Our prayer is great. Our small group is great. We really genuinely love each other. But we're spiritually growth capped because we're not making disciples. And as we start joining Jesus in those outward relationships of finding lost brothers and sisters and bringing them home, we are not going to experience the fullness of joy and excitement and love that God has to offer us. All of the things that we're already doing, they're going to be better in heaven. Worship, it's going to be way better up there. Loving one another, sharing, giving to one another, it's all going to be better in heaven. The only thing that is better now, because it's not going to exist in heaven, is making disciples. The only thing that he asks us to do now that we can't do for the rest of eternity is make disciples. You will never have the chance again to see God heal. Because there won't be sickness then.
That's right.
You will never have the chance to experience divine reconciliation between enemies because there won't be any enemies. You won't have the chance again to participate in redemption or to welcome home a runaway or to give someone their very first taste of forgiveness. You'll never have these chances again. It's summertime in Redmond, Oregon, and it's time for us to take our foot off the clutch and begin a journey, this all-inclusive family vocation. I'm really looking forward to taking this trip with you. Your homework in this week is to read and share the story in Genesis 24 as a family. I want you to share it twice. Go through it twice, because I really want you to become familiar with this story in Genesis 24, because we're going to use it as our platform, as our map on how to make disciples through the rest of the summer. So go with God, and may you experience many, many more of his blessings as you join his presence and his purpose this week.